Steve Harvey dropped the microphone and walked off the stage. The entire studio fell into silence. That letter was about to change everything. The cameras were rolling. The lights were bright. The audience was laughing. It was just another Tuesday afternoon taping of Family Feud, the show that had made Steve Harvey a household name for over a decade. Families competed, buzzers rang, and Steve delivered his trademark reactions that turned ordinary answers into viral moments. But what happened on this particular day had nothing to do with comedy. It had everything to do with the fragility of life, the weight of loss, and the power of a father's final words. Standing at the contestant podium was a young woman named Sarah Mitchell. 20 years old, brown hair pulled back, wearing a navy blue dress that looked carefully chosen. Her hands were shaking. Not from nerves about the game. Not from the excitement of being on television. She was shaking because folded in her left hand, pressed against her chest, was a piece of paper that contained the last words her father would ever write to her. He had died 3 weeks earlier. But no one in that studio, not the producers, not the audience, not even Steve Harvey himself, knew what was about to unfold. The game had started normally. Sarah's family, the Mitchells, were competing against the Rodriguez family in what should have been a light-hearted battle of wits and quick answers. The board flashed questions. Buzzers sounded. Steve cracked jokes. The audience clapped on cue. Everything was following the script. Except Sarah wasn't really there. Her body stood at the podium, but her mind was somewhere else. Somewhere darker. Somewhere final. Her father, Robert Mitchell, had been a firefighter for 30 years. A man who ran into burning buildings when everyone else ran out. A man who coached Little League, who built tree houses, who never missed a dance recital. 3 months ago, he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks later, he was gone. Sarah had auditioned for Family Feud with her family months before the diagnosis. It was supposed to be a celebration. A memory they would laugh about for years. Instead, it became something else entirely. When the acceptance letter arrived 2 weeks after the funeral, Sarah's mother found her crying in the kitchen. "We should cancel," her mother had said. But then she remembered something. Robert had written letters. 5 of them. 1 for each family member. He'd hidden them in different places with instructions on when to open them. Sarah's letter had a single sentence on the envelope. "Open this when you're on that stage with Steve Harvey. Make me proud." So here she was. Standing under studio lights. Holding her father's final words. Wondering if she had the strength to do what he asked. Steve Harvey approached the podium for the next question. He looked at Sarah and immediately sensed something was off. After thousands of episodes and tens of thousands of contestants, Steve had developed an instinct. He could read people. And Sarah's eyes told him everything he needed to know without her saying a word. "You okay, sweetheart?" Steve asked, stepping closer, his voice dropping from performer mode to human mode. Sarah nodded, but it wasn't convincing. Her hand gripped the letter tighter. Steve looked at the paper in her hand. Then back at her face. The audience was quiet now, sensing the shift in energy. Even the producers in the control room leaned forward in their chairs. "What you got there?" Steve asked gently. Sarah's voice cracked when she spoke. "It's from my dad." Steve's entire demeanor changed. The comedian disappeared. The television host vanished. What remained was a man who understood loss, who had buried his own father, who knew that some moments transcend entertainment. "Your dad," Steve repeated softly. "Is he here today?" Sarah shook her head. Tears started forming. "He passed away 3 weeks ago. Cancer." The studio went completely silent. Not the manufactured silence of a dramatic pause. Real silence. The kind that settles over a space when something sacred is about to happen. Steve Harvey stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. He didn't look at the producers. Didn't check with the director. Didn't worry about the schedule or the format or the fact that cameras were rolling. He made a decision that defied every expectation of what a game show host is supposed to do. He walked off the stage. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Steve descended the 3 steps from the main stage and walked directly to Sarah. The audience watched in stunned silence. Camera operators adjusted their angles instinctively, knowing they were capturing something unrehearsed, something real. When Steve reached Sarah, he didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, close enough that the conversation became private even though millions would eventually watch. His presence alone was a form of communication. It said, "I see you. I'm here. This matters. Tell me about him," Steve said quietly. Sarah's dam broke. Through tears, she told him about her father. About how he taught her to ride a bike by running behind her until she didn't need him anymore. About how he always saved the last piece of pizza for her. About how he sang off-key in the car and didn't care who heard. About how he'd planned to walk her down the aisle one day. About how cancer had stolen all of that. The Rodriguez family, the opposing team who moments ago had been competing to win $10,000, stood silently with hands over their hearts. Members of Sarah's own family were crying openly. The studio audience had become witnesses to something more important than a game. Steve listened. He didn't interrupt. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't rush her. He simply listened with the fullness of his attention, and sometimes that's the most powerful thing one human can offer another. When Sarah finished, Steve looked at the letters still clutched in her hand. "What's that letter say?" Sarah unfolded it slowly, carefully, as if the paper itself was sacred. Her hands trembled so much that Steve gently steadied them with his own. "He told me to open it when I got here," Sarah said. "When I was on this stage. With you." Steve's eyes widened slightly. He understood immediately the weight of what was about to happen. A father's final instructions. A daughter's last connection. And somehow, impossibly, Steve Harvey and this game show stage had become part of someone's goodbye. "You want to read it?" Steve asked. Sarah nodded. "He wanted you to hear it." Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. What happened next would become one of the most viewed moments in Family Feud history, but in that instant, no one was thinking about ratings or virality or social media. They were thinking about a father who loved his daughter enough to orchestrate one final moment of connection from beyond the grave. Sarah began to read. Her voice was shaky at first, barely audible, but as she continued, strength seemed to flow into her words. "My sweet Sarah," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means you made it to that silly game show you always wanted to be on. It means I'm not there with you, but in a way, maybe I am. I want you to know something, baby girl. I want you to know that every single day of your life has been the greatest gift I ever received." Steve Harvey's jaw tightened. His eyes glistened. Sarah continued. "I know right now you're hurting. I know you think the world is darker without me in it. But listen to me carefully. You don't need me to be your light anymore. You are the light. You always have been. I was just lucky enough to stand close to you and feel warm." Several audience members were openly crying now. Even the camera operators were wiping their eyes between shots. "I wrote this letter because I needed you to hear these words in a moment when you're doing something brave. Standing on that stage, in front of all those people, takes courage. Living your life without me here will take courage too. But you have it. I put it in you. Every time I told you that you could do anything. Every time I believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. That wasn't just dad talk. That was truth." Steve Harvey, a man who had stood on stages in front of millions, who had hosted Miss Universe pageants and primetime specials, who had made a career out of keeping his composure, was struggling to maintain it now. Sarah's voice grew stronger. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to win. Not the game, although that would be nice." She smiled through tears, and so did the audience. "I need you to win at life. Get married if you want. Have babies if you want. Build a career that makes you proud. Travel the world. Eat too much cake. Laugh until your stomach hurts. Do all the things I won't get to see. And when you do them, know that somehow, somewhere, I'm cheering louder than anyone. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Sarah looked up from the letter, directly at Steve Harvey. "There's one more part," she said. "He wrote something specifically for you." Steve's eyebrows raised in surprise. "For me?" Sarah nodded and continued reading. "Mr. Harvey, I don't know if you'll ever hear these words, but I'm going to write them anyway. Thank you for making my family laugh during the hardest year of our lives. When I was too sick to get out of bed, we would watch your show. My wife would sit next to me, Sarah would curl up at the foot of the bed, and we would watch you make people happy. For those 22 minutes, I wasn't dying. I was just a dad watching TV with his family. You gave us that. You'll never know how much that mattered." The silence in the studio was so complete you could hear the electrical hum of the cameras. Steve Harvey's face crumpled. Tears rolled down his cheeks. This man who had entertained millions, who had built an empire on charisma and humor, stood there completely undone by the words of a stranger. A firefighter from Ohio who had watched his show from a hospital bed and wanted him to know it meant something. Steve reached out and pulled Sarah into a hug. Not a quick, polite television hug. A real one. The kind that says, "I've got you. You're not alone. Your father's love is still here, and I'm honoring it with you right now." The audience rose to their feet. The Rodriguez family crossed the stage and joined the embrace, wrapping around Sarah and Steve in a moment of collective humanity that transcended competition. Even the crew members, the people who had seen thousands of episodes, set down their equipment and applauded. When they finally separated, Steve took off his suit jacket. The beautiful, expensive, perfectly tailored jacket that was part of his signature look. He draped it over Sarah's shoulders. "This is yours now," Steve said. "You keep this. And every time you wear it or look at it, you remember that your father's love wrapped around you today. Through me. Through this moment. Through all of these people who just witnessed something sacred." Sarah clutched the jacket, nodding, unable to speak. But Steve wasn't finished. He pulled a card from his pocket. His personal business card. The one he didn't give out to contestants. The one reserved for people who mattered. "You call me if you ever need anything," Steve said. "I mean that. Not television, Steve. Me. The person standing here who just heard your father's words and wants to honor them by making sure you're okay. You understand?" Sarah nodded again, clutching both the jacket and the card like lifelines. The game didn't resume that day. The producers made the unprecedented decision to award both families the prize money. Because some moments are bigger than rules. Some moments demand that we recognize we're not just making television. We're part of each other's stories. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the taping, after the lights dimmed and the audience filed out, Steve Harvey sat alone on the stage. He did something he rarely did. He called his own father's number. The line that hadn't worked in years but that he still couldn't bring himself to delete from his phone. He listened to the out-of-service message and whispered, "I miss you, Dad." The jacket Steve gave Sarah still hangs in her closet. She's worn it 3 times, to her college graduation, to her wedding, and to the birth of her first child. A daughter. Named Roberta. After the grandfather who orchestrated one final moment of love from beyond the grave. The letter was framed. It hangs in Sarah's living room. And underneath it, she added a small plaque with a quote from Steve Harvey himself, something he said as the cameras finally stopped rolling that day. "Your father didn't leave you. He just changed addresses. And love doesn't know distance." Steve Harvey never forgot that day. In interviews years later, when asked about his most memorable moment hosting Family Feud, he doesn't talk about viral clips or celebrity guests. He talks about a letter, a daughter, and a father who taught him that sometimes the greatest thing a host can do is stop being a host and just be human. The jacket, the card, the letter. 3 objects that carried love across the boundary between life and death. And Steve Harvey, a man who thought his job was to make people laugh, learned that day his real purpose was something deeper, to witness love, to honor it, and to remind us all that connection is the only thing that survives us.